everyone, I'm Sev Marcel, as Tilly said. Thank you for joining me today. So, for the past year and a half, I've been leading the research and strategy focusing on kids, teens and families at We Are Family, while also wrapping up my master's in psychology. So, in the last couple of years, I've been really deep in the mechanics of how people think, how they choose things, and definitely all the gatekeeping that happens and why. And then that gelled over with my own experiences as a mum, a stepmom, and recently, believe it or not, a grandmother. It's compelled me to really shine a light on the role of parents, and perhaps in the future, the role of grandparents for this year's Shake It Up theme. In this session, we're going to challenge an assumption that has quietly underpinned much of what we do in this industry, which is all about the idea that children are the sole decision makers when it comes to what's watched, what's loved, what's bought, and that views alone are not really the only signal of success. Before getting started and getting into the data, a little bit about We Are Family. So we're a global collective of psychologists, cultural experts, anthropologists, strategists, and creatives. And everything we do is rooted in understanding how young people, and crucially their families, engage with media, brands, platforms, content, life, really, in general. While our global network spans 30 markets, the disruptors of our London hub are led by our lovely CEO, Maurice Wheeler. And these are the friendly faces who are the leaders at our London hub, where we have a curious bunch of people who work for us within our teams, and that's where we shape, challenge, and sharpen ideas to bring innovation towards our clients' requirements and solutions to life. But we're here to shake it up, so let's just get stuck in without any further delay. The world of kids' media is spinning faster than a merry-go-round with a broken speed dial. We're in post-lockdown, post-schedule, where algorithms rule. The content is infinite, but definitely attention is not. During the pandemic, many parents relaxed the rules, whether out of necessity or, frankly, in my case, just out of pure survival. But now the guard is back up, and that means brands need to work that much harder to get that parental stamp of approval, which is not a nice to have, and it's definitely not it's a non-negotiable to be able to become a household name. But how can we be sure? So we haven't operated on a hunch. We have gone through and done some number crunching with, in the US and UK with parents of 2 to 6-year-old children, over 1,000 of them, where we really dug into their favourite brands, their co-viewing, their rituals, their attitudes towards things. Then we dove even further into the human element with our qualitative side, with IDIs, focus groups, to try and really understand values and cultural fit and education perks, bit of nostalgia, etc., and exploring that, and really trying to understand how all of that comes to life in a home. And then we actually layered all of that over with some research from an academic point of view to understand behavioural psychologists who also do media studies, to really understand if all of that stuff really triangulates across the top and makes sense and ladders up to something that we should really be paying attention to. So we often discuss in this industry what kids love, what they binge on, and what goes viral. What we found is that 85% of parents are actually co-deciding, pre-selecting, and sometimes flat out gatekeeping what their child watches. They manage all of that through curated playlists, household rules, or repetition of what they trust, and that indicates that parents still have the control over the remote. I personally spoke to many parents who had developed their own ways of actually curating what's on YouTube from their phone to make it seem native to what they were projecting into the living room, but they were controlling it from their phone, just to make sure that their kids were kept safe. And that means that if you're chasing views without earning parental vote, you're not really building loyalty, guys. You're just borrowing attention. To unpack this a little bit further, if we look at how influence shows up, When asked how much influence parents felt over their child's screen content, 79% of parents said that they either had complete control or quite a bit of influence. And then the remaining 20% were still influential, but with a bit more negotiation at play. When getting under the skin of why we feel so compelled to control these things and to ensure that what we allow our children to watch, we came across keywords like I'm safeguarding my child, I'm making sure that they're not exposed to anything that's going to hurt them, I'm trying to ensure that they're viewing and witnessing modelled behaviours so that they become good citizens. It was one of the quotes that really stood out to me was one of the parents in the UK particularly said, "It's like sugar for the brain. My toddler's obsessed, but I hate how hyper she gets after watching it," along with others expressing mistrust for the platform itself, not naming any names, because we all know it's necessary, but there is that cognitive dissonance that is absolutely at play. And then supporting this notion, we had Niken and Scholes, both academic scholars in psychology and media studies, explain parents aren't passive co-viewers, they're shaping what gets watched, when, and how. 1 in 3 parents indicated in our survey that they have and will pull the plug on a show when they themselves are not happy with it. This is significantly more the case in the UK than in the US, which sort of suggests that UK parents may have stricter boundaries or lower tolerance thresholds, especially in terms of overstimulation and tone or perceived behavioural modelling. And interestingly, while this is the case for markets, it didn't make any difference when we looked at the different age groups. So we had the 3 to 4 category and the 5 to 6 category. Didn't make any difference whatsoever. When asked about how they put a stop to a particular content, we only found that 11% of parents said that they outright refuse the content out loud, whereas all the others do it on the sly, almost in sleuth mode, so that there's no tantrum, so it's a distraction, kind of get you over here, let's do something else, this is more interesting, etc. The reasons for pulling the plug, however, for parents was all values-driven, and they really came from a place of, this doesn't reflect what I want in my home, was one of the quotes that really sat with me. We mapped parents' responses for why they refused content, which is now formed into what we've sort of modelled up as the parental veto radar. So the most common triggers of this were inappropriate or age-inappropriate content, behaviour that's bratty, rude, aggressive, portrayed by usually the protagonist of the story, overstimulation with no payoff, excessive consumerism or thinly veiled product pushing, or just shows that they just flat out found irritating, ugly, relentless. One parent described what usually happens in her household: I cave and I let her watch it, then quietly switch it off when I see that bratty behaviour from the main character. Another explained that the flags are there, but for the sake of convenience, and let's be honest, I'm a parent, as I said, and I've had many a time where I've gone, just for the sake of convenience, you're going to watch this for 10 minutes, so I can just have peace and a hot cup of tea. And so that's definitely a factor at play still. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, in my opinion. So parents don't love or hate brands in neat, compartmentalised or consistent blocks. They're navigating this tension: what's fun versus what's overstimulating, what's familiar versus what's overdone, what's wholesome versus convenience right now, as I said. So even when a show appears to be in, certain aspects of it can still set off alarm bells. The same brand can be flagged as overly overstimulating and then simultaneously praised for its educational value, or described as morally annoying in one breath and then a go-to when I need that 10 minutes break. So what we understand by this heat map is that, and the radar, is that these polarised feelings are for the same piece of content, and when one's marked as red and the other one's marked as green, how do we really make sense of that? Now, along this matrix or this heat map, I do have real brands from the survey of which ones came out where. I think what we need to say about this and remember about this, that during this emotional calculus that parents are kind of running on the fly, it's the bits that they really value that need to be in green, and certain things that are lower down on the value scale that can possibly be more amber or red, and therefore you still get over that mark into that trusted field, into that bit where I'm happy to leave my kid alone to watch this without me specifically monitoring and curating. I'll get into that in a little while. But if I'm going to keep it classy and not reveal the actual brands, but if you did want to hit me up later, I'm more than happy to share the actual data with you. So if we examine the process of a child seeking permission to watch something and parents running that 5-point scan, deliberating quickly whether or not the content in question will benefit their child, household, and equilibrium in the present moment and into the future, it looks something a little like this. These were the top drivers that basically we found over and over again across both territories and across different parents of different age children. First and foremost, it teaches something positive. Not preachy, but purposeful, whether that's kindness or sharing or just purely maths. Second, the child enjoys it. Now, this seems obvious, but what's really interesting to me is that it's not top priority. And that to me indicates that it tells us something that enjoyment gets you considered, but the impact is what gets you approved. Third, it models good behaviour. So parents are looking for shows that act like an extra teammate, supporting their values and that they're trying to instill in their household. And then calm tone, low chaos, something that doesn't fry that nervous system. And then finally, that subtle but crucial one that we keep talking about, does it reflect my values? Not in a moralizing way, but in the way that feels like my home. Similarly, academics like Diaz and others have long stated that parents filter content based on developmental relevance, emotional safety, and alignment with their values. One parent we spoke to explained, if it teaches, it's a yes. If it calms them down, it's a yes. If it winds them up, switch it off. That was the benchmark. These 5 drivers that we've talked about, which we've now packaged up into a fit test, is what we've called it, show that parents are looking for and permitting content that supports their family from an emotional, moral, and a developmental perspective. This is where a show goes from background noise to a trusted brand. So to get these right, if you are aiming to get these right, or at least 3 out of 5 we feel, then you're in the family ritual, you're in the bedtime routine, and you become a part of that lunchbox. So let's break it down. First one is positive role models, characters that reflect who they want their child to become. Oh. Second one is nostalgia and something that's familiar, which serves as a connection point between generations, and it creates shared memories and shared time. The third, age appropriateness and safety, giving parents that deep parental exhale and certainty of their child's welfare. Fourth is family fun and humour. It engages, it entertains, and it doesn't wind everybody up. And then last, values and education. So something that feels like it's co-parenting with them, not just babysitting. Let's keep moving towards advocacy, which is where shows become part of family culture. So most shows are built with the child in mind, and that's precisely where they should start. But what happens when you also win the heart of the grown-up in the room? You unlock what we call that parental enjoyment trifecta, which is a blend of bonding, genuine entertainment, and a hit of nostalgia. This is when parents want to co-view, they rewatch, and they also share with other parents. As Huang and other academic colleagues found, this kind of emotional alignment doesn't just feel good, it drives loyalty, longevity, and brand engagement that spans the entire household. When asked whether they personally enjoy watching any shows with their child, 71% of those that we surveyed responded yes. 90% of parents stated that they co-view at least twice a week, and 42% claimed that they do it with full attention. Now, I know as Brits, that might seem quite high to us, and there's a reason for that, and there is a statistically significant reason for that, according to the data, because UK parents definitely don't do that as much as our US parents across the pond. 42% give it their full attention overall, but this is a lot less in the UK, as I said. From an age standpoint, parents paid more of their undivided attention when watching shows with their 5 to 6-year-olds, which at first sight I thought was really interesting. It didn't really make sense to me because I was always like, surely I've got to be supervising my younger child. Through the qualitative discussions we had, what we understood from that is when a child reaches 5 to 6, they've reached that ability to actually talk to you. They're a bit more sophisticated in their likes and expression and communication skills, and therefore having those enjoyment factor of shared time and moments and discussing and bonding is when it happens. So that's why parents of 5 to 6-year-olds seem to watch together a lot more. And I see that as a window of opportunity for content creators to provide opportunities for shared time, which is where loyalty really lives. And then moving on to the next stage, enjoyment gets you watched, but trust gets you rewatched. So if a parent doesn't trust your content, your tone, your message, or your intent is a bit, then it stops there. 77% of parents say they'd buy merch from a show they like and trust. But here's the flip side. Popularity doesn't always equal trust. We know a few shows out there that have got many, many, many eyeballs on it, but unfortunately, when you look at the shelves and the merch that's available, it's not converting as you would expect. And this is where those cracks start to show. So even though you might go viral on YouTube, if a parent doesn't feel good about what you're offering, the wallet will stay shut. So the brands that earn that trust tend to hit specific criteria as well. So where they're trusted in one way, they're not necessarily trusted in other ways. Values and education, Bluey, Sesame Street, Miss Rachel, seems very obvious. Safety and developmental fit, Cocomelon, Dora. Shared humour, SpongeBob, again Bluey. And then that nostalgic comfort came from Peppa, Paw Patrol, and PJ Masks. However, even though these trusted brands are even though these are noted as trusted brands, if you remember that heat map I showed, there are certain elements of each where they're not all getting that green scale. So going back to the parent fit test is your opportunity to really run that test to see where am I falling down, where can we be a bit tighter. To demonstrate this further, let's examine the power of trusted content. So it doesn't just get played once, it gets rewatched, recommended, and extended. I really loved how, at Question Time yesterday, Ollie Hyatt at Blue Zoo Productions referenced that, media is really the third largest group of people who are childminders after parents and teachers. And we have that obligation to try and bring great quality content to kids. And to kids, but as we can see from the data, to parents as well. So when parents see how helpful a show is, and that it can enhance emotional literacy, provide routine support, or simply just doesn't add to the chaos, they really start describing it as an ally. And that's when the wallet opens up. So if we look at that 4-part cycle, trust leads to rewatching. Rewatching leads to recommendation. Recommendation then becomes a natural expansion into all the verticals of your franchise that you want to lean into, whether it be the books, toys, songs, birthday cakes, etc. As the academics also say, Livingstone and Blum basically put it as media supports parenting goals. It stops being screen time and becomes a partner, and that's where true fandom lives. So trust earns a place on the screen, but affinity is what earns a place in the family culture. Let's talk about the commercial impact a little bit. So when parents like a show, they are 6 times more likely to buy the merch. And 90% of parents said that they're likely to buy if they like the show themselves. And 63% of those that we actually spoke to had already done so. And that wasn't because the child asked, it was very definitively asked, did you do this yourself on your own without the child asking you? And the answer was yes. And that was because the brand was offering something that was a value exchange for the child and the family's life as a whole. Gong and Holiday, pair of academics again, stated when parents perceive value, especially educational or emotional value, they become brand supporters. So all of this is really teeing up across the board. If we want to visit a brand that does it really well, who do we think I might project up on the screen next? Anyone? Bluey. So, undoubtedly a really good example demonstrating everything we've covered so far. Bluey not only strikes that delicate balance of respecting the parent without losing the child, but it also earns that emotional loyalty, which has the merchandise flying off the shelves, it earns those repeat views, it secures its place in the bedtime routine. It's a true parent ally, so much so that 29% of parents told us that Bluey helps them as parents. One person actually said, which kind of made me really emotional, I've got to be honest with you, it made me a bit teary, which is really weird for a researcher, but it's the first show I've ever watched with my son that made me a better parent. That's huge, that's massive. It's not louder, it's not faster, it's not flashier, and it demonstrates what happens when you consider both audiences simultaneously. Everything we've covered so far basically builds towards that family alignment ladder. So this is just a way to visualize how a show goes from into a household and it stays there and it becomes a fandom. So level 1, it's allowed, it passes the basic test, it's not harmful, then it's trusted, then it's loved, and then it's advocated for. Very quickly running through this, I've run through the parent fit test, the family ladder, and the parent multiplier, which is where we have the parent trust percentage. How much are they watching it without your supervision? On average, do you co-view it and have those shared experiences? And then, is merchandise actually being sold and sought for? I have a little interactive thing. If you have your phones at hand, please do just quickly scan it. I'm running out of time to actually go through and do this on screen, but I'd really love it if you just went on it and clicked one of the options that are available to you, because I just really want to gauge where people's heads are around what needs to be done. If you were to do this in the next 48 hours, not the code scanning, do the code scanning now, but if you were to do something in the next 48 hours, what would it be? So just to finish off, a kid's squeal might get the show turned on, but the parent's nod really keeps it going and unlocks those repeat views, co-viewing, merch, trust, etc. I've run out of time, so I'm going to say thank you very much. I hope that sparked something in you, and got loads more data, so come and see me.